Hey, Kayla, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I was very lucky to meet you at Total Force Plus a while ago, and we had a brief discussion about business and nonprofits. And I thought, man, I definitely have to have you on this show to break this all down because you have some really great insights that I want to learn more about. So thank you for doing this.
No, I'm happy to do it. It's a really unique space, that's for sure.
Yes, yes. So I kind of want to go back to the beginning. Like, what problem in the military community did you see, or there was something that you felt was missing that you needed to change or do something about?
Yeah, I think this is kind of a idle hands situation where I was very new to the military community, but I married my spouse perhaps a bit later than some others marry their spouses. I was 25 at the time, and so I didn't grow up in any of this. And so I had this concept of what military family support looked like based on commercials, and Facebook stories. And so when I got into that lifestyle and we were stationed overseas, it was really just that disconnect between what we are told that support looks like and then what the actual access is. At the time we were stationed in Italy and I did not have children, but I quickly recognized that the only spouses who were working were those who didn't have children or their children were teenagers. And I thought that was absolutely insane given what I thought the military childcare kind of support system looked like. And then I very quickly learned that that is not really how it's accessed, and that disconnect is what prompted me to that and all the time I had because there wasn't a lot of employment available overseas to create a system to do this better.
And so, what did you ultimately create?
Yeah, so I again, that military spouse life, you just move so much and everything's so chaotic. So I had started with a for-profit. I don't know if you know this, but moving every year to 3 years is not very conducive to a nonprofit. So I started with an LLC and started doing work in data gathering, pilot programs. It was really difficult to get that off the ground given the model. So eventually I did shift over into a nonprofit. I still have my for-profit, but the nonprofit Operation Childcare Project. So they offer case management services free military and veteran families nationwide.
What do you mean by case management services?
Good question. So it's related to childcare. So what we recognized was that the childcare options that exist, especially for military veteran families who are very transient, are hard to understand. They vary by state, sometimes county. And when we get our support from the military side, we are getting military childcare options only. And so no one will really dive into what makes up most of the childcare support structure, which is really this trusted caregiver, your friends, your family, your neighbors, other military spouses. So where we really focus is how do we understand a family's full childcare need, not just the 7 to 4 that might be in a center, but ancillaries, special needs, all of those pieces, and then what actually exists to support them. And we vet those resources, recognizing that sometimes resource overload is the problem, especially if they are not what the families actually need.
Yes. So, I'm sorry, did you say that that includes things that are on installation, maybe like hourly care or something like that, plus civilian stuff?
Yeah, so where we really focus is, and so many people are surprised to learn this that are not in the military world, that we don't have just warehouses on installations where you can drop your children off for free and it's nationally accredited. Like, that's not how it works. And so, what we have are a lot of young families, especially, who think that they can just wait and then they'll say, oh, I need childcare when they're ready. And then they will just take their children in and they're good to go. So we do a lot of work on what are all of your options that you could piece together and how likely are you to actually access those options so that we can help them plan accordingly. We don't want anyone signing up for something if the wait list is a year and a half from now and they need care in a week.
Yes. No, I don't think a lot of civilians or people that don't have children understand some of the logistics and the uniqueness of having children and being a military spouse is that I mean, you literally could show up to a location, your spouse leave for whatever reason to go someplace else. You have no friends or family, and you come down with the flu. So it's not just like, hey, I need to like have a mental health break. It's like,
No,
no, like I'm super sick.
Yes.
And there's way too many stories of military spouses just asking one they barely know to watch their child just so they could get to themselves to the ER, or trying to take kids to the ER with them because they have nobody else. And so it's really kind of, I think the Army, I was very benefited by hourly care, even though those
Hmm.
appointments too are competitive. You know, you have to sign up for
Yes.
them. Hopefully, if you're sick, and you can get a cancellation if they don't have any available. But there's a lot of juggling with that, especially if you have not grown up in that community. So you don't know who are trusted people that can watch your children, what are the resources available in the community. So I like that you're pulling it all together for people to make an informed decision about their children.
We very much, and just as an FYI, most hourly care is gone now. That
Mm,
disappeared kind of years
that's a
ago. It was
bummer.
slow. Yeah, it is. I used hourly care as well when I did have a child eventually. It was the only way that I could do things like go to medical appointments
But
or
the other branches didn't have it. That was something that was at one point unique to the Army, is that they had the hourly care. Because I know the Air Force at one point didn't have it when I tried to go like on another installation, stuff like that. So that's a bummer that they've done away with that.
yeah, it's really frustrating. And what we're seeing more and more are these like piecemeal programs, kind of these band-aids that are stepping in to try to fill these gaps. We very much believe that if families are given all of the information they need, that they will make the best decision for their families. And in that sense, we talk a lot about putting the families back in command. So rather than all of these entities coming together and saying, I bet this is what families need, and creating all of these different programs, which may or may not actually fill that need, they should really just ask the family, what would help look like to you? And then either support that or create some program around it. You know, we see something that I'm seeing a lot more pop up of are the appointment care, kind of an on site child watch situation in military hospitals, which is great when it works out for them, but it is a child watch service. You know, it's not a child care service, and so it's a different type of care. They can't really do bottles or change diapers, and it's supposed to be very limited to only during your appointment time and only at the military treatment facility. And so, heaven forbid, you have to go off the base because you have select, TRICARE Select or something. You can't use that kind of care. So these are those things where I think they're well intentioned, but because they don't ask the families about what care they need or what gaps they need filled, we keep seeing these programs develop that aren't really filling that need.
Kind of switching gears a little bit. When you started this, you're dealing with children, childcare, and information. What made you decide to start it as a nonprofit? Because that's something that, you know, a decision that needs to be made early on. And is it just because it's dealing with kids, that it's dealing with the military? Because sometimes that is the like go to, like, hey, you're military affiliated, so you should just be a nonprofit.
When I tell you that I was drug kicking and screaming into this nonprofit, it was violent. The more I learned about the systems when I had my for profit, when I was only operating under my small business, I was adamant that there was no way that I was going to create a nonprofit for this when so many people are profiting already, one, off the labor of military spouses who we do tend to just jump right into creating a nonprofit, and two, on this issue at large. There's so many people with hands in this pot that aren't creating the change that should be happening. And so, yes, I understand that that is a very nonprofit driven mission, but I was pretty adamant initially. I was like, absolutely not. This is going to be a small business. We should be paid for our labor. If I'm solving this issue and I'm gathering this data, I should be compensated for that. But it is an optics thing. You know, I tried that for 2 to 3 years, and every time I would sit in a room, and it would be a room with other for-profits and nonprofits and conglomerates, and they would say, "Oh, you're not a nonprofit? Well, I don't know if we can work together if you're not a nonprofit." And I said, "Well, what would change between the two? Because it's just a tax structure. And so what is the difference here?" And they said, "Oh, well, unfortunately, we can only operate with nonprofit." And so I did eventually create a nonprofit. I held the LLC because I was not entirely positive, but they were very receptive. The nonprofit was far more digestible, much to my frustration. But if that's the way that we have to operate it in order to help families, then that's what I'm willing to do. But I generally always discourage people from creating nonprofits.
Yeah, so then I have two questions there is, well, I'll do the first one. You still have to bring in money. So
Yes.
I like the word that you use there, digestible. So for bringing in the money for some organizations to give you money, you being a nonprofit makes it more digestible for them, or to go back to their board or whoever it is who they're accountable to say, hey, we are giving this money to a nonprofit that's doing this work in the military community versus we're giving this money to a person that has a for-profit business in the military community. Might still be really great people that are leading those two organizations, nonprofit or for profit, but that is more digestible.
Yes, far more palatable. I think it came down, which is really interesting because when we do see the entities that, for example, the military does contract with for some of these, they are for profits. We see that routinely. But I think it was kind of a military spouse owned business that is also a for profit was just not seen as being something that was acceptable compared to maybe a national organization with no military affiliation that is, a nonprofit. And so I think it is just more digestible. We bring in more income within the first 6 months on the nonprofit side than I did in an entire year on the LLC side, which is just wild to me because I did literally the same thing. I just stopped doing it in an LLC and I started doing it under a different tax structure. And then suddenly it was okay. Suddenly it was acceptable and we could move forward. But that's not common among startup nonprofits. And I feel like I need to lay that down before anyone out there with an LLC is like, that's it, I'm getting a nonprofit. Because it is very complex. There's a lot of old relationships that need to be built. And luckily, I was able to start building those while I had the LLC. So when I transitioned over, it was not as much of a lift. But it is still a very complex system that you get even more limited by if you don't have a direct path forward.
Right. Yes, but you're still earning a paycheck, or you
Right.
still have a salary that you can earn that you just pay yourself through the nonprofit versus, paying yourself out through a business.
Yeah, I wasn't able to pay myself out through the business in the years that I did it. Pretty much everything I earned went right back into the business I was doing. So yeah, on that nonprofit side, now I'm able to not only pay myself, but also the other 9 people I have employed.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a huge difference. So bring it in. I mean, it's hard when you know you can bring in more money that way, just structuring it differently. For people that are listening to this and are thinking, like, hey, I have been wanting to start a business, and they're like, should I be looking at a nonprofit? Like, what is your advice for people that are in that phase of, should I move forward with a business or should I move forward with a nonprofit? Does it have to do with the work that they want to do and who they want to do it for, that they should be in a nonprofit? So what's your overall advice for that?
Well, one, always looking at that market first, right? So who else is doing the same work that you're going to be planning to do? If no one is doing it, ours was a pretty unique subset at that time. If no one else is doing it, then I always recommend that for profit structure first. Creating really, it's not an exaggeration of the blood, sweat, and tears. It is 14 to 18 hours a day, every day, for years before you really start to see that traction and momentum happen. And I'd say one of the big downfalls of the nonprofit side is that nobody owns it. So at least on the for-profit side, if you're able to make that happen, that's yours. That's something that you create, you manage, you make the decisions. On the nonprofit side, it's different. No one can fully own a nonprofit. That's the point of the nonprofit. So you're answering to others. If you want to sell it, others have to agree. Like there are a lot of factors in that nonprofit side where it really does become very selfless in that way of I'm building something that ultimately I don't own or get to control the direction of. So I always recommend we start on that LLC side because there's also less risk on the LLC side. And so it's just I feel like it's almost like a starter. And then if you can make that work, stay in it. And if it's not working because you're being told around every corner, I wish you were a nonprofit, I wish you were a nonprofit, then it's time to step into that nonprofit side and see what can it look like. But I always recommend keeping your LLC. Every military spouse I talk to who says, I'm going to switch, I'm going to do a nonprofit instead, I say, do both. You can do both. Have, of course, you can't overlap. There's a couple of factors in there, but do both. Different missions for each one because you never know when you're going to need the other.
Yeah, that might be a good time to ask you, what does your LLC, that your for-profit business, do that's different? How is it different?
Yeah, so the LLC has shifted to consulting mainly. So something that I have learned over the years is that a lot of people want to be in the military quality of life circuit. And by people, I mean companies. Fortune 2, 3, 4, 500 companies want contracts with the military. They want business, they want connections, but they lack the culture and the insight of what is the actual issues that families are facing, not just what's publicized, and then what would actually be helpful to give them the edge when they are submitting bids and contracts and things like that. So now the LLC does consulting in that way. So when there are companies who want to sell something to the government, when there are states or local governments who want to start supporting military families in a better way, that is what the LLC does, that consulting piece, which is separate than the nonprofit, which is the case management, the pilot programs, and safer care, things like that.
That more military spouses need to be aware of the knowledge that they have and companies that are willing to pay them for it instead of giving away their information for free. There's so many people like, hey, just want to do a call with you to hear your thoughts. How does this all work? What are you seeing in your community? They want that intel because they're going to monetize it. And instead of paying you $200 an hour, they're trying to get it for free. So it is consulting when somebody's asking you for that knowledge. But unfortunately, there's a lot of military spouses that aren't familiar with business and understand that what they have is actually quite valuable.
When I tell you, since I started doing that consulting and I sit in the rooms, and we do frequently see that these entities would hire veterans, and sometimes the veteran has been out for 15, 20 years and they're consulting on these topics. And it's really interesting because I might say something really simple like, oh, well, that area of Florida has a naval base and an Air Force base. And that just blows their mind. And I'm like, inside I'm like, but you're basing your entire contract around this. That would have been a Google. But if they
Very
don't know what
important.
to Google
Yep.
and they're paying someone, yeah, they're paying someone like $180,000 a year to sit there and know that information. And so you as a spouse who have been at 8 different installations can come in and say, actually, it's not called that at every installation. These are the 3 names it's under. And that's where you get your $200 to $300 contract consulting hours in.
Yes. Yes, that's is so true that they don't understand. You don't know what they don't know.
Mhm.
And you do know it, and you know that it's an important factor, but unfortunately you could actually save them a ton of money or a ton of heartache. And I wish that more companies, one, in organizations, did not take advantage of military spouses in that way. I mean, it could be as simple as like, hey, we could pay you $50 for 1 hour of your
Right.
time to give this information. But I love that you've built a business around it, and I hope that more military spouses do that instead of, it's just so bad. I didn't realize how bad it was until like sitting on boards and things like that, that hey, this is all, we should be paying people for this. This is
Yes.
consulting work. Unless it's something that is beneficial to you. So if you are, hey, this is a great networking opportunity. Hey, this is a foot in the door. So understanding what you get out of it, if it's mutually beneficial, if they're not paying you for it, but there should be some value that's provided back to the military spouse for the information that they're able to help somebody make money off of.
I know Jennifer Barnhill's done a lot of work on this recently, but just looking at the free labor that military spouses give to really stand up every aspect of how the nation's defense operates. I do think more people are waking up to that fact that it is free labor and that if they continue to do that in a free way, it will never change and push back a bit. It's something that was really important to me when I did start the nonprofit and did finally start getting money in. That we had a few volunteers and I immediately started stipends. I was like, here is, this is all I can do right now is $50 a week. For your 2 hours, let's see what else we can add as we go. And I've been really fortunate in keeping a lot of those they shifted into employees as we got more funding. And I fully credit that as to why we have grown the way we have, because I did demonstrate, not that there's no value in volunteering. I think, again, like you said, strategic. If there's reasons, you should do it. But if you're doing it for ultimately income and you don't see that shifting towards that income, it's not going to give you that innate drive to try harder, to grow, to expand. And so I very much think that everyone should get money when there is money available. And we as entities, I think, have a responsibility to stop asking for free labor first.
Right. Yes, it's so true. I even for both of my business, a lot of people will say, "Why don't you ask for more help?" Or I don't have the money to pay, and I won't do that. I won't do that to military spouses. Even sometimes if I have, it's like, "Hey, I'll teach you everything I know about this subject. You
Yes.
know that's beneficial to you." Like I'm trying to give back as much as I possibly can, but it's really hard because it's like, "Hey, you're small, you're trying to grow." And you need help doing all of these things, but within our community it's just I don't want to be part of that problem, so I'm very mindful of it. But I hope that, especially big companies understand, like, this is something that they have the budget and it could actually help military families. So it's definitely something that it's frustrating, but I could see. But also too, like, I did so much volunteering that helped me in my business, and it was strategic, like you said. There was purpose for it and helped me get better at what I do. It also helped me understand the playing field really well in order to be able to stay. And I don't think a lot of people understand that, like the point you brought up about that call. They don't understand the playing field, but you do. And so it's like you are missing a few players here on the board that are really going to be a wrench in your plan. And sometimes it's like I'm not willing to anymore do that. Like, to see, like, hey, you're not willing to pay me for consulting. I'm not willing to tell you right now exactly where you're going wrong, even though I see it just in this, 15-minute call to see if I know what I'm talking about. And so I'm willing to, like, give a little to show that I'm competent in the field that I am in. But then the other times I'll just dial back. And then the other thing too is online. A lot of people share free information in, chats, and I get, like, again, showing that you're proficient, that you're professional and stuff like that, but you are giving a lot of it away for free.
I can't tell you, this was really frustrating for me. I saw something recently. I try to stay out of social media as much as I can, but there was something recently in one of these spouse groups, and it said, "We are looking for experts in these 8 categories for to set up a hour-long interview. It will eventually be made into a resource book." And I was the only one who kind of everyone else has said, I'll help. And I said, just curious, who is the company for? Like, who is the company that this is going to be for? And they were very hesitant to say. And then eventually they said, well, it's for this bank, and we create these resource books, and that way other banks have them. And then I said, do you charge people for those books? Is that like a revenue piece for you? Because you're putting your name on it. So do the spouses get their names on it? And it was no. So you give all the information. They have to pay to be a part of this bank's group, and then they have to pay for the book as well. So there is a double income opportunity based on the free labor of the spouses, but it's like this guilt trip kind of. It's like, well, don't you want them to have that information? Don't you want them to give accurate information? I do, but we also got to stop exploiting spouses.
Right. Yes. Kudos to you for doing that, to call it out. Because again, a lot of people just, they want to help. They're trying to get traction. They're trying to start their career or get their name out there. And you're right. That is the word. They're being exploited because of military life and them trying to get outside the box to try to make money, build their career in any way that they can. And that's unfortunate but it's so prevalent on social media to get, like, free information.
So bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I could rant about that all day. I'm sorry. This
Me
is
too.
why
Me
this,
too.
this is why I wanted to have Kayla on the show. This is a tee up to our conversation in at Total Force. But kind of back to the point, what do you wish that more people understood about starting a nonprofit? Because there's all of these things like we're talking about, but at the core, what do you think most people, like, don't know that they need to know?
You hear a lot about small businesses, right? Starting your own business and how most don't make money for the first 5 years. A lot go under. There's a lot of percentages around that. No one really talks about that on that nonprofit side. And nonprofit also has a So a lot of failing businesses, a lot of failing nonprofits, or they really hang on operating on less than a $5,000 a year for year over year. Because the second piece is that in any given market for nonprofits, there are the major organizations, and those major organizations, even if they are not doing the amount of work you're doing, nonprofit is not an area where you can really pour yourself 1,000% in and everyone will see how hard you're working and how much change you're making and then you will get more money. That's not how nonprofit works. Are competing with people that have probably had entities for decades and they have powerful friends in powerful places, and it is very hard for anyone to even find out who you are, and then you are competition. So there is competition absolutely in for profit. You are competing, but you're competing based on what you can do and what you can deliver. In nonprofit, it's your name. You are competing based on your name. So will you make them look good when they say, we have given this funding to this organization? And so it takes most organizations 3 to 10 years to start building that traction if they're in an area where there's a lot of nonprofit. And military veteran space,
Yes.
heavy,
Yes.
heavy. You are competing with thousands of entities who may have been doing this for years before you. And so it is just, the competition is almost unbelievable. And the gatekeeping is really intense.
That is, I think that applies to business in the military community as well, is the gatekeeping and people trying to keep you in your place.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, hey, no, that's cool. You're doing that, but don't come around here.
Exactly. It's really, we're working on with a couple other entities kind of this project on how much small nonprofits stand up operations for military families, but they get less than 1% of that nonprofit funding that's assigned to those entities. It is the tiniest little fraction. And so it is like entities like ours, other small grassroots nonprofits who are serving families day in and day out, like helping, solutioning, data gathering, and they get nothing. While major entities who have these big marketing budgets, they just keep getting the hundreds of thousands of dollar grants multiple times a year from all of these different entities. So it is a really difficult space, but I think we're starting to see a little more transparency in that. I think people are kind of starting to figure some of those systems out as we have now gone sometimes decades and the same problems exist. They haven't shifted.
All you're saying there kind of leads to my next question about funding.
Mm.
That is a big side of nonprofit that people I don't think are aware of before they start one, is like you have to bring in funding. And you touched on you're up against much more established and bigger marketing budget nonprofits. Like, what's your advice for people on understanding that and what that looks like and bringing it in?
I think you have to have a whole mindset set shift in this. As much as I'm against free labor, there was a lot of free labor that went into that. And you have to accept that. I think you have to do very much an inventory of your life and say, like, can I do this for up to 3 years and receive $0? Would that work for my family? Because if it doesn't work for your family, then that's probably not the structure that you need to be operating under. And that's just the reality of it. When it comes to the funding on the nonprofit side, you can get little grants, you can get $500 grants, $1,000 grants, but you have to weigh that against the labor that comes with it as well. So if they want 4 reports a year and you need to give them all of this additional data, the juice doesn't equate to the squeeze on that. And so it does take, most entities that grant to nonprofits will not look at a nonprofit until they've been operating for at least 3 years and for funding. And even then, they usually need to have an operating budget of, it's different for everyone, but like at least $20,000 a year, at least $50,000 a year for all of those years. So there's a joke I've heard, it's not really a joke, is you don't start a nonprofit unless you already have money. But it's kind of true. Like, if you don't already have a backer, if you don't already have someone who has said 100%, if you do this, I will give you X amount of dollars towards this mission, I would be very cautious to enter it unless you're prepared and your family is prepared for you to operate without income for some years.
Right, because there has to be an operating budget for you to do the work that you're trying to do or what your nonprofit is trying, the work they're doing. If I mean, passion is great, but you really have to have a passion and a drive for, I mean, and that applies to business too, is
Yeah.
that, and so they're very close. I like that you mentioned in the beginning, it's a tax structure and this, more palatable that you're a nonprofit, but still ultimately like you have to bring in money and, or like you said, or start just kind of like starting a business. Are you going to bootstrap? Do you have a little, do you have 10 grand to get this thing off the ground? Same thing with a nonprofit. Do you have a little bit of money to get the ball rolling? And that's investing, I guess, in yourself and what you
Hmm.
believe in for your business. But that's a lot of money to continue to try to bring in every year. And that's a big part of, if you are at the helm of that nonprofit, you are the person that has to go out there and knock on doors.
Yeah, it is. You have to be comfortable with it. That's for sure. It's not something that I ever planned to do in my life. But here we are. And then when you start getting those employees, making them all very aware of when you are a startup, hey, I can guarantee this for this amount of time because that's how long my grant is. Very clear with everyone, it is not my intention to not get this grant again, but I want everyone to be cognizant of the situation because it is not as stable as perhaps a small business could be, where when you do start operating, you're going to get that money every time. Nonprofit is very fickle, and people lose money all the time because ultimately the entities who are giving you money, usually it's because they find that they have some extra money at the time. If that ever changes, then your money is gone. It
Yeah.
is out the window because they are not going to give extra money that they don't have.
In the very beginning, you mentioned that military life had an impact on having a nonprofit. Can you kind of explain that a little bit more for people that are interested in this, but kind of some of the challenges that they'll be up against, or maybe some benefits?
I think that, I mean, the benefit is that when you're doing any kind of nonprofit, if it's related to military and you're already in military life, you already have a leg up. You already understand acutely what the issues are. You're not going to waste your time and effort in something that doesn't materialize into impact because you've lived it. So you know that that doesn't help. You don't need a website with 10,000 links on it for resources because you know that that already exists in so many places. And so I think it saves you a lot of time. What you're up against, though, is this pervasive free culture, the free labor culture, that you should do it because it helps people. And the military community is kind of the worst at this. I can't tell you how many times I get cold emails, messages from companies, sometimes other nonprofits. They're all usually military affiliated, saying, we're going to do this event, we're going to do this conference, we're going to do this prayer group, and we need childcare, but we have no budget. So can you set up childcare for us on site so that our people can attend, and you would have to cover the cost? And it just becomes like, I can't tell you how many times. And it's just like this cycle, which sometimes, yes, we will adjust and help in those situations where we can, but it is going to be an uphill battle for anyone in the nonprofit space in the military to fight that idea that you should be working for free, that everything should be for free, and it should be out of the goodness of your heart, that you are doing these things. And so that is something that I was not fully prepared for, given how much money I know goes into a lot of these entities that are in the military helping space. And it's something that I'm still battling every day. So if you're not ready to say, love to help, cannot do it for free, please let me know. If you develop a budget, and we can step in and figure something out, then take a class, because that's going to be 80% of it when you start.
Yes. No, that's a really good point, that there's a difference between, I do this, have to deal with all the time with my conference. It's like, hey, I don't have a big budget, but I have this amount of money, and or these are the things I could do for
Hmm.
you.
Yeah.
So it's like you're starting with something, not just asking somebody, or it's like, hey, I do need you to do this for free, but this is what I can do for free for you later. Like
Yes.
so there's ways to go about it versus like, hey, you have this nonprofit, you're clearly, it's all about doing good in the world, but doing good also costs money
It
sometimes.
does.
Like you have to pay people to come and so that
Hmm.
would be asking your staff to come and work for free. So somebody has to pay them. So that's a good point, that you need to be comfortable with like having healthy boundaries.
Saying no. Yep. I would say that that is the biggest. hurdle, because I agree. Yeah, we will work with people if they, especially if I know they're a small organization and there is a real impact that we could make there, that becomes mutually beneficial because now I can gather data. I can reach more of my demographic. We can do a little bit of flexing, but there's a lot more of the you should do it for free and do it on your own than there is that other side. And so I think getting used to saying no or not right now is a skill that I would absolutely encourage anyone looking to go in this nonprofit space, especially around military or veteran support.
Just kind of wrapping it up, what are what is kind of the biggest mistake you see people make when they start into a nonprofit?
It is a lack of differentiation. It is, I want to help this group. Okay. And then they just start advertising. I've started a nonprofit. I want to help this group. But what makes you different than the 10,000 other nonprofits that are also helping this group? Like, what have you identified as an issue that everyone else has missed? It's no different than for profit. Like, it's no different than a real business. I shouldn't say real, it is still a business.
Yes.
But a for-profit structure where you have to be different because you are a little fish in this big old pond, and they don't differentiate. They just say, for example, veteran suicide is an issue, and I created this nonprofit to help with veteran suicide. Okay. Agreed it's an issue. What are you doing that's different than what everybody else is doing? What is it? And I think that is what people really struggle with before they get started. So then they come out with a very generic mission statement and vision and operations. And I very much encourage, if you recognize that the entities who are doing it are not doing it well, find what they're not doing well and start there. Because that's why we got traction. We were different than the other entities who were serving military children or military families, because we found that area, that little niche area of understanding all your options in one place, and we filled that.
Yes, that's a really good point. Well, there's a million more questions I could ask you. I'm gonna have to have you back on this show, but I'm gonna switch gears real quick and ask you some quick random questions I ask
Right.
everybody. First off, what is one resource or tool that makes your life or your work easier?
Monday.com, it's a CRM, and they have a nonprofit discount if you go down that.
Really? I didn't know that. Okay, that's interesting. I use Airtable, so I don't know that I've had anybody come on the show that's mentioned Monday. I mean, I've seen it advertised, but I might take a peek at that. So, okay, I'll put a
Yes.
link in the show notes for everybody. What is your favorite book right now, or your favorite book of all time?
And I'm reading a lot of books around my children now, and I gotta say, like, I see this a lot in the spouse groups, and so I will still say it, even though it's a child book. I've thought about it over the last 8 months. Is called Gifted and Distractible. It really talks about how you re-look at children's actions and behaviors, and instead of seeing all of them as these things that have to be fixed, that perhaps it's just things that need more rather than less. And I think that applies to a lot of military families, because we do see so many quote behaviors in children with our lifestyle. And so this book has helped me reframe that. And I've been using it a lot in my work. Highly encourage Gifted and Distractible to anyone who has a child who's being kicked out of a CDC or a childcare center or something like that because their child is too much, to take a look at that and help it reframe your thinking. You're doing great.
Yes. No, that's a really great recommendation. I'm going to be sure to put that in the show notes for everybody to check out. That is really great, because each child is different in every family, and different things that are going on, especially in the military community. Yes, definitely. Fantastic recommendation. Okay. Now it is time for my favorite part of the podcast, which is game time. And in honor of your visit, I thought we'd keep kind of rolling. So we're going to play Fact or Fiction Nonprofit, because I
Got it.
just feel like there's a lot of things that people don't know about it. And you are definitely an expert in this. So if you get 3 out of the 5 correct, you get bragging rights that you won game time on the MILMO Show, which is a really big deal, Kayla. So you're going to want to get that.
Ready.
Okay. Number 1, nonprofits can't make money. Is that fact or fiction?
Fiction.
Yes. They can have a profit, and they can pay people and all those things. Number 2, most nonprofit leaders spend a large portion of their time fundraising. Is that fact or fiction?
Fact.
Yes, that's another part I don't think people realize. Number 3, nonprofits can compete with businesses. Is that fact or fiction? Yes. Yeah, I mean, I'm in competition with nonprofits all the time.
I'm in competition with for-profits all the time.
Yes, yes. So, okay, you have bragging rights already, but you have to finish strong. So, number 4, starting a nonprofit is easier than starting a business. Is that fact or fiction?
Whew, fiction.
Yes, because you have to form a board. I don't think a
Oh,
lot of people real.
Lord.
Yes, and then you have to work with that board.
Yes. If you don't pick right the first time, you are stuck for years until there's a cycle.
Oh wow, yes, I never even thought about that. That's a
Mhm.
whole nother show right there. I didn't even think about that. Boards for nonprofits. I'm gonna have you back to talk about that.
Yes,
That would be a
please.
good one. Yes. Okay. Number 5, nonprofits must have a board of directors. Fact or fiction?
So technically fiction depending on state. So some allow member owned, but you do have to have an outside entity and most of that is called board. You can't just have a seat.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I didn't know that there was a nuance there. So you definitely have bragging rights that you won game time on the MILMO show. I really appreciate you coming on, playing the game, and for all the knowledge you shared. Can you tell everybody listening where they can learn more about you and the work you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're Operation Childcare Project. Our website is occproject.org.
All right. I'll definitely link to all of that in the show notes and ways to connect with you. So thank you again, Kayla. I appreciate it.
Thank you.